Hey everybody, Aaron Cowan, Sage Dynamics, and this is the Ironhorse Firearms Sentry 12 magazine-fed, pump-fed shotgun. It is no secret that I'm not a huge fan of shotguns. They do have their place, and that place is in a museum. There is an asterisk, of course. They're great for shooting little clay discs, they're good for breaching doors, and they're good for shooting beanbags into drunks. That's about it. And I know that might be shocking news to some people who haven't been following the channel for very well, who haven't attended a class from me, especially in a home defense class. I'm just not a fan of shotguns. I feel like I can get really good ballistic performance out of things that don't have the same proclivities to aggravation as especially pump action and some amount of shotguns have. Now this is based on my personal experience, but it does relate to the review because I'm going to be way more critical of something I already don't like when I review it. Getting into the Sentry 12, it's a magazine-fed shotgun, which isn't a new concept. It goes back a long time. However, it's not as prevalent as traditional tube-fed shotguns, even when you get into the semi-automatic category, and this being a pump action. It has 5 or 8 round proprietary magazines, ambidextrous controls, and a monolithic 1913 rail interface to add accessories. It's a takedown, so take it apart, I pull out one pin, the whole gun comes apart. Of course, I also have a barrel nut I've got to remove if I want to take the 18.5 inch barrel out of it. Non-rifled. They also have a 10 inch breacher barrel available for those of you who wanted to SBS this. The stock is fixed, so you can't really throw a shotgun brace, pistol brace, brace. Can't really throw a brace on there for that shorter barrel. However, if you're going to do SBRs anyway, then SBS wouldn't be a big deal. I do like the idea of a magazine-fed shotgun, even though the 8-round magazines are a little long. They're no longer than some magazine for some other calibers from other rifles that I've used in the past. 5-round magazines, of course, give you 5 rounds, or 5+1 if you wanted to do that. One of the biggest issues with pump action shotguns getting into it is its pump action, which means your accessory interfaces are limited, although people aren't as likely to put as much stuff on a 12 gauge as they would on like an AR platform or a semi-automatic rifle. I do like the option of my controls being where my hand is going to spend most of its time. So for light mounting, it wasn't that big of a deal. I just went ahead and mounted it on the 12 o'clock there with my Surefire DF. The gun itself, well, it's 12 gauge and it shoots 12 gauge ammunition, 3 inch and shorter. Your traditional 12 gauge length shells feeding from a proprietary magazine. This is a 2,000 round review. 2,000 rounds of 12 gauge left me a little sore. Most of that was buckshot, double-aught, and then smaller. And I also shot a lot of slug through the gun throughout the review process. There is no burn down, mainly because 5 or 8 round magazines, you can do the math on that. That'd be a ridiculous amount of magazines for me to purchase. Now, Ironhorse did send this gun out to me for review. They sent me the gun in 2 5-round mags. I bought an additional 4 of the 8-round magazines to kind of speed the process up throughout the review process. Shooting mostly Federal ammunition throughout the review to get a really good feel for the gun. The feel is, it's a shotgun. It behaves like a shotgun. It performs like a shotgun. However, I did start to, getting right into it, notice some issues that were kind of unique to the magazine feeding system. Meaning, it's a proprietary magazine. And any gun designer can tell you it's easier to design a gun than it is to design a magazine that will reliably feed it. The magazine itself isn't bad. There is a very rough relationship between the magazine and the mag well. They don't always work smoothly together even as they start breaking in. And another thing I identified with the magazines is this small plastic retaining clip that actually holds the round in place until it's fed into the chamber will occasionally take a vacation. I'll be loading it and it'll just pop off and all the rounds will just come shooting out of the mag, and then I've got to hunt down this little this little metal clip and the rounds that were in it. That did happen to me a couple times during the review process. Not a big deal, but it's something that I fixed with glue. Who knew? And I hope the manufacturer takes to heart and then comes up with a solution to maybe pin or in other ways retain that small plastic clip. Maybe they kind of designed it that way so you could take it apart, but you can take the floor plate off. So I don't really understand why you would. Well, why would you do that? That didn't happen very often, but it did happen. When it wasn't happening, which was most of the time, the 5 and the 8 round magazines fed mostly reliably. Every now and then, and this was weird to me, on a pump action gun, I would get kind of a Brazzer situation. I'd get an attempted double or even triple feed. I'd have more than 2 rounds trying to leave. And this is crazy because it's a single fed magazine, but I'd have 2 rounds that would sneak past the gate and they'd both try to come out at the same time and both try to go into the chamber, which is impossible. Not gonna work. And I don't know if that's something unique to the design of the gun or whatever, but it did happen occasionally. When it wasn't happening, which was most of the time, the gun fed reliably. The ejection is a little anemic for my tastes. You'll notice on the pump action, even when I'm really working the gun kind of fast and I'm putting a lot of strength into working the actual pump, the ejected hulls are not coming out of there with any enthusiasm. Wasn't a big deal, but every now and then I would catch one, and that of course would cause a malfunction. As far as the function of the gun works, the trigger is excellent. Sometimes people don't put as much thought into shotgun triggers as I do, and they do obsess over the triggers in, say, handguns or semi-automatic rifles. But this shotgun trigger in the Sentry 12 is excellent. I like it a lot. It's got a really smooth but positive pull to it, really short reset, and manipulates well. I think that's important. It's got enough weight to it that I can change my mind, but not so heavy that I'm really kind of getting convulsive on the gun before I'm actually able to fire the shot that I'm trying to shoot. The safety selector ambi, the levers are really short, so that makes adjustments easy. That makes sweeping it off, sweeping it back on easy, but it's not so long that it's going to be in the way. The other, of course, controls that we have is gate release, or I'm sorry, the pump release, and the fact that it's charged like that. I got my little pump release. That little ambi situation, it's a straight down press right there at the back of the mag well. That works really well. And of course the magazine release itself. None of the magazines will really reliably fall free. You've got to do a purposeful removal of them. Which I think is just polymer on polymer relationship. That's going to be more common than not. When you have a polymer lower and you have a polymer magazine, there's that friction between those two same materials that occurs, which creates unnecessary drag. It would have been nicer to have one of these, either the magwell or the magazine, be made out of metal, and the other one could have been polymer, and we would have had a much smoother relationship. But it's not that big of a deal. It's just something you got to be aware of. There's plenty of other guns out there where you have to do a physical purchase of the magazine to get it out of there, or a manipulation in that area to get out of the gun. So that doesn't bother me so much, especially since I'm able to reload 8 rounds or 5 rounds into this much faster than I'd be able to get them into a tube-fed shotgun. One thing you should do with every shotgun is pattern it. Know how the gun shoots. Also, if you're running, well, if you're going to zero an optic on a gun, and I don't see any reason not to put an optic on a shotgun just because it's a shotgun, because there's this myth that you just point it in the right direction and it's going to hit what you're aiming at. That's not true. I put a Trijicon MRO on it and zeroed it at 25 yards. Now I zeroed it on slugs, so that's going to give me a little bit better data. But just giving you guys an idea of, one, how well the gun shoots and how well it patterns, here is a 5-shot group on Federal Hydroshock slugs fired from 25 yards. And then with that same zero, I was curious, okay, switching from slugs to double-aught, in this case double-aught Federal True Flight, how is the gun going to pattern for the zero that was zeroed on slugs? So here's 5 rounds of Federal double-aught True Flight. I think that's pretty acceptable accuracy. I also think that's pretty acceptable patterning for this gun, going from slugs to, in this case, double-aught. Throughout the review process, I fired a little bit of triple-aught. I didn't have a whole lot, and I didn't want to order any more because I'm not really a shotgun guy, so I don't surplus a lot of shotgun ammunition outside of less lethal stuff like beanbags. However, I did order and shoot quite a bit of number 6 and number 8. Also double-aught, and of course slugs in a couple different ounces. And gun just shoots. My biggest complaint is the length of pull. Hands down, biggest problem I have with this gun is the fact that the length of pull is not adjustable, and I feel like I've got to crowd into on the gun too deep. Which for some people that's not going to be an issue at all, something you wouldn't even notice, but it's something I definitely noticed throughout the review process. Is I felt like I had to hug the gun a little bit too tight to get to the right pocket, right position to manipulate the controls that is the way I wanted to manipulate them. If I'm being honest, and of course I am in every review, I feel like there's some parts in this gun that need a little bit more attention on QC. The pump action, the actual most important part of the shotgun when it comes to shooting sequential rounds, felt really gritty for the first 1,000 rounds. That is a lot of rounds through 12 gauge before things start to smooth out, and that was with me doing my initial oiling before the review process, before I started the review. I still felt it was very gritty, and of course that's going to wear in, but it was noticeable immediately. It wasn't something I kind of noticed as I got a feel for the gun. Like the very first round I fired and then worked the action for the first time, I was like, oh, ugh. But it did work in, and that's fine. The trigger was great first to last round. The safety selector was great first to last round. Magazine issues, kind of already talked about that. The gun is accurate. That smooth bore, I'm getting good accuracy at 25 yards. I wanted to do the 10-inch on it, but for most people that wouldn't be relevant for this view process. So even adding to that video, you'd be like, cool, I'm not going to do that. So just running it on the standard 18.5 inch. I think it's a really good design for a magazine-fed pump-action shotgun. I'll say that right now. I do like it, but there are small things about it I don't like. I think the length of pull should be adjustable, and I think that they should choose a new supplier for their QD. They have built-in QDs there in the stock, and I had to countersling because one of them, no matter what, it was so out of spec that no QD that I put in it would actually interface and lock in, whereas the one on the other side did every single time. So that was a problem that I noticed. And of course, and it is a shotgun related problem, but you are limited on mounting on the 3 or the 9 o'clock up front. So for QD mounts up front, you got to use one that indexes off the 12 o'clock, which isn't that big of a deal. It's something I had anyway, so I just threw it on there if you're going to run a sling on it. But the monolithic rail is great for other purposes. It seems to be very well in spec as far as mounting. Like I use an ADM mount in this case for running the optic on it. I don't like shotguns, but I like this one for the shotguns that I don't like. There are some, like I said, and kind of, you know, just hitting the bullet points again, a little bit more QC on final finishing, especially on the pump arms. Magazines are, the magazine itself is great when that little retaining clip doesn't pop off, which again didn't happen often, but it happened enough for me to mention it in the video. It wasn't like a one-off thing. It happened on 2 or 3 magazines, 2 or 3 different times throughout the review. Luckily I was able to hunt that little piece down, and I fixed it myself just by gluing it in place, which may be not recommended. Maybe there's a reason that thing isn't retained the way that what I feel like it should be. So if you are going to purchase one of these, the price is reasonable, the performance is good, you're getting a magazine-fed shotgun. It's not something I would personally buy because I don't buy shotguns. I do own a few shotguns. I've got a Benelli, and I've got a Mossberg, and I've got a, you know, an 870, because you got to own that for some reason. But I'm just not a huge shotgun fan. That being said, this is not a bad shotgun to have, especially if you want to get away from a tube-fed design. You want a pump action that's going to be able to feed from a magazine, which makes reloading even easier. I would definitely love to see this shotgun also offered in a 20 gauge for youth, or for people who just don't like the recoil of a 12 gauge, but also something that is a little bit more friendly for the pedestrian shotgun shooter. If you're going to buy a 12 gauge shotgun for home defense, but you're not going to run the gun, you're not going to take classes with it, you're not going to practice with it, you're just going to occasionally look at it and be like, yep, that's still there, I'm safe. This would be a really good idea because it is so much more similar to a semi-automatic box-fed detachable magazine rifle. It eliminates some of the problems that less experienced shooters encounter when they fire a traditional tube-fed shotgun, and that alone is worth the price of admission, and the price of admission is not that much for what you're getting. I think in future iterations, we're definitely going to see improvements on some of the parts that I experienced issues with. So I'm not really holding it against them, but I wanted to make you guys aware that I did experience those issues during the review. And me being as critical as I am of shotguns in general, I'm still relatively happy with the performance of this gun. The accuracy is there. The reliability is there for the most part, the magazine being the biggest issue that I had. And I think that they should take another look at extraction and ejection to get those holes a little further away from the gun, especially when I'm cycling with a little bit more enthusiasm than shooting at one clay pigeon in the sky. So if you're curious on my thoughts of the Ironhorse Firearm Sentry 12, there you go. I'm Aaron Cowan with Sage Dynamics. Train accordingly.